Hi, I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. I'm the host of the No BS Coaching Advice podcast here on Anchor.fm. If you've always wanted to start a podcast, Anchor makes it ridiculously easy to do it. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's completely free and ridiculously easy to use. I know I've used two other services. One was very expensive, like $700 a month expensive, until I realized I was getting hosed, and now it costs me much less, but it still costs me. Another service that's inexpensive, but it still costs me. Again, it's 100% free. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcast. I do no BS coaching advice here, and it is a breeze. I can record on my laptop. I can record live off my phone. Again, very, very easy to use. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. This is the No BS Coaching Advice Podcast, episode 137. I'm your host, Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome. I'd like to spend some time talking with you about different things on Monday morning as a way of launching the week well. As I've said so many times before, I want to help you look at life, the universe, and everything. Today's show comes from a lot of different places, and I'll just start by saying that, this weekend I was reading something from a book called The $1 Trillion Coach. Great little book about a man who coached some of the big firms and the firms that have become big in Silicon Valley, a man named Bill Campbell. There's so many different points in this, and one I want to bring out is courage. That it's important to look at things and go big. Because the truth is, you're not going to fall on your face all that often. But when you go big, number one, you stretch yourself. Number two, you discover that there's so much more that you can do, that you're holding yourself back. So much starts with courage. I remember I did a class when I was in coach training, and one of the instructors, a man named Lance Secretan, spoke about a model that he works with called the Castle Principles. It's an acronym for courage, authenticity, service, truthfulness, love, and effectiveness. So often we play small, and the result is it's no wonder we feel exhausted. We're not really working with care. We act like we accept mediocrity instead of going for the gusto. Get out there, be bigger, try harder. You'll grow so much more. I was listening to the TED interview. It's a podcast hosted by Chris Anderson, who created TED Talks. He was interviewing Johann Hari, Hari, and the podcast is terrific. Let me just back up for a second. The TED interviews are terrific because they're a deeper dive with some of the TED speakers. And Hari, amongst a whole host of things he spoke about with regard to depression, spoke about how in the workplace, people are often depressed and frustrated, and the reason is they have no control over their work. They're turned into little more than robots. They have flesh and blood, but what's expected of them is robotic behavior. Folks, if you're in a situation like this, get the hell out. You may talk about work-life balance and that you like this because you can go home at 5, but you spend so much time at work and there's no balance to it. When you think about it, You're home, let's say you have a 1 hour commute each way. So from 8 to 6, plus the prep time in the morning, let's say 7 to 6, 11 hours of your waking hour, you're involved in some aspect of work or getting to work. And the rest of the time is what you would call the balance. It isn't balanced. And as such, the way to achieve the balance is doing something that you care about, doing something that matters, where you have a degree of autonomy over your work. Do you really want to get micromanaged? Do you really want to be the modern clerk, Bob Cratchit, working for the Scrooge on Christmas Eve? Because that's what a lot of you are really doing. You're working for Scrooge on Christmas Eve, who's demanding so much of you, so much more. And don't get me wrong, I love effort, as you'll hear in the next segment, but there's a certain type of effort. There's a certain demand to the effort that makes all the difference in the world. Don't be a clerk. Don't turn into Bob Cratchit. This weekend, the Pro Football Hall of Fame inducted new members to the fraternity of great football players. And one by one, black or white, young or old, they were paraded up in front of a microphone next to a bust of how they would appear in Canton, Ohio at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And one by one, each man stood there crying. He had reached his pinnacle in his career and was reflecting back on how he wound up being there. It started off with someone who loved him, someone who cared about him and pushed him hard. It could have been a parent. It was a grandparent for one of the men. Actually, both grandparents who were there and loved him and pushed him. Yet, there's a difference between being an 8-year-old boy playing in the backyard or in a small neighborhood football game and someone who goes on to the Hall of Fame. And along the way, each of these men got what I call the tap on the shoulder of an older man seeing them and encouraging them and pushing them to greatness. And I want to be clear, pushing, as one of them said, wasn't about the kind of verbal abuse that so many of our boys experience and so many of our girls experience. It was about the push, the demand with a heart to it. As one of them said, it was amazing to hear him referred to as one of our boys and do it not in a denigrating way, but in a way that showed that the coach loved him. And by the time he made it to the pros, he understood that hard work was a big differentiator, that you needed to understand the plays, but you also needed to work hard at it because there were people working to take away their candy, if you know what I mean. None of them used that phrase, but fundamentally, that's what it was. There was always someone there to take their job or to beat them on the play. Folks, how hard are you working? Seriously, how much effort are you really putting in? Or are you going through the motions? I'm not talking about time. I'm talking about practice, preparation, real effort. Because that seems to be a big part of the Hall of Fame difference, is working on the plays to make sure that you reach perfection, working on the mental aspects of it, so good enough isn't. What are you really doing? Be honest with yourself. So I want you to go and take out what I'll nickname with a touch of humor to it, an antique iPad. You know, a few sheets of paper. And I'd like you to draw what your work should look like, what you dream of how your work should be. What are you doing? What kind of work do you do? Who's around you? What kind of place are you working at? Take some time with this. Don't try words. I just want you to slow yourself down a little bit and do a little bit of drawing. It doesn't have to be with crayons, although if you have access to them, that would be great. Pen, paper, whatever it is, pencil. Okay, you can use your iPad and just draw it. Draw yourself at your work and what you're doing. Not today, but what you want it to be. And when you're done, I want you to go to another piece of paper and draw what it's like to be at home, what everyone's doing, the smile on their face, the joy. Are you sitting around a table? Are you watching a screen? Whatever it is, what are you guys doing? And once you've taken the time to do that, now, on the top, put the words, "my perfect job." And on the next sheet of paper, "my perfect home life." Remember these. Put them away somewhere. Always remember what this was. And the next thing I want you to do is take an action toward making the work life possible. It may involve researching a new career. Same thing with your home life. A small change that you might try to make. Don't force it on other people. Talk with your wife, husband, or partner about how the two of you cooperatively can redesign your life at home. Same thing in the workplace. We're talking about redesigning your life in accord with the drawing. Now, you may find that the work life may be hard, but so what? Take a step, and it's time to start doing research. You see, most people have the idea, but take no action. I want you to start taking actions to make change. And it really does start with courage. And it involves being authentic with yourself and honest with yourself in a really deep way. Because it's hard to provide the best of yourself when you're lying to yourself. It's time, folks. It is time. So that's today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to the show. Just subscribe so you get downloads whenever I release a new episode. Each show is going to be bite-sized morsels of advice just like today's. I hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope you subscribe. And if you do choose to subscribe, I hope you decide to support the show. There's a link that will take you to anchor.fm where you can make a pledge in support of the show. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're interested in my coaching you, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. Mention that you listen to the show. I just happen to like knowing I'm helping some folks. And once we're connected, message me about your interest in coaching. We'll set up a free call. We'll get acquainted, see if it makes sense. I'll be back soon with more. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great day. Take care. Time for